I honestly love going camping. It helps me to relax and kick back for a while, enjoying the tranquility and scenery. So when my friend from college invited me on his yearly camping trip, I couldn't wait. I had been studying all week for my exams and needed a little vacation. I was packing my bags at my house the morning of departure when I got a feeling about the trip. Like something spooky or horrible was going to happen. Like I shouldn't go. I really needed to stop watching horror movies at 2 a.m. I'd admit it, I was a big horror movie fan and just loved that feeling of being scared and having my adrenaline pumping. I probably was still spooked from watching The Exorcist last night. Man, she was a creeper. A chill went down my spine just thinking about her. I then remembered what my good friend Jake told me about the trip. It was a trip to a nature park up near the mountains. I had been there before with my parents, but that was ages ago. I was only 6 and my memory of it was very vague. All I could recall was that it was one of the biggest parks I had been to. Jake told me exactly what I needed for the trip over the phone. He specifically told me to only bring a bag of clothes and a chainsaw. When I asked him about the chainsaw, he simply said that it was needed and hung up. I laughed a little, because Jake probably wanted to pull a prank on the other campers, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something. Jake had always been a mischievous prankster, and I loved his pranks, because they would always involve some sort of horror story. Last year, he dressed up as Freddy Krueger on Halloween, and went to the girls' dorms in the middle of the night. I was laughing so hard when they realized it was him, after pinning him down and taking off his mask. He had detention for the rest of the year, but he thought it was worth it. He may not be that great at pranking, but he loves to do it. As I was putting the last of my clothes in my bag, I heard a car honk outside. He must be here already. I quickly zipped up my bag and went to my garage. I grabbed the chainsaw and rushed outside to meet my friend. "Well, I see you remembered what was needed," said Jake with a grin. "Just put your stuff in the trunk, and let's get this show on the road." I ran toward the back of his truck, and threw my bag and chainsaw in. I couldn't wait to go camping. "We're here," said Jake loudly and happily as he parked the car. We had finally arrived at the park, and I had gotten to know more about Jake's friend named Alex. Jake had told me about him earlier, and I thought he sounded pretty cool. He was a photographer and enjoyed taking pictures of nature and stuff. He seemed kind of nerdy, though, and won't stop talking once he started. I can't say much, however, because I guess having black hair and wearing a black veil bride shirt makes me appear emo. He kept going on and on about his photo collection, showing me his pictures and the Harry Potter series. I was tired, though, so I really didn't care about what he said. Finally, "We're at the park," is all I was thinking as I got out and stretched my sore limbs. I looked around at where we were and was kind of shocked. Jake had apparently took a shortcut through the woods and got us to a random clearing. Of course, I didn't really notice before being half asleep. We were engulfed completely by large pine trees, and I wondered how we got here in the first place. As we began unpacking the truck, I noticed a green duffel bag in the back with a label that read "Murderous Mike." It smelled horrible. Like something died in it. I asked Jake about it, and he told me it was needed and grabbed the tent to start setting it up for tonight. Murderous Mike. What the hell was that? I assumed it was the supplies for his funny prank, and thought nothing else of it. It was dark now, and we were eating dinner around the fire. I don't know if I would call s'mores and Doritos dinner, to be honest. As we were eating, we were talking about school and girls. You know, the usual stuff. Then, the conversation turned into scary stories. We all went around telling the spookiest stories we knew. Alex told one about some guy named Red Eye, and I started laughing, because it was so stupid. I mean, who kidnaps girls, just because you have a red eye? Being a fan of creepy things, I told a Creepypasta story, of course. I told them about the showers and Jake liked it, but it probably scared the crap out of Alex. I could tell he was shaking a little and looking around the forest. as if someone was watching him. It was Jake's turn now. I love hearing his stories, because he makes them sound so real. Like it really happened. I was eager to hear and couldn't wait. However, Alex was a wuss and said he had to go pee. He got up quickly, and grabbed his flashlight. He made his way toward a small pathway of trees in the dark. That guy must have been really spooked, because he walks slowly, while shaking and muttering something to himself. Man, that scaredy cat. I realized how quiet it was in the forest. No voices, or partying, or anything to do with signs of human life. Anywhere. Nothing but the roar of bugs in the night. Jake was starting his story now, so I gave my full attention. I couldn't believe what I was about to hear. There once was a young boy named Mike, he said, who lived in a small cabin out in the woods. He was a very naughty boy. Always getting into trouble. He would always steal cookies from the cookie jar, draw on the walls, and everything else that would be considered naughty. His parents tried to correct his behavior by applying strict rules and punishing him, but that only made things worse. The little boy seemed to enjoy being punished. He didn't cry after spankings. Instead, he insisted. He liked to sit in the corner of the room and stare at nothing for hours upon hours. This caused his parents to become horribly worried for their child. Horribly terrified something was wrong with him. The parents both agreed one night to take him to a mental institution the next morning to help their poor child. However, that night they were woken by screaming from outside. A sickening scream. The kind of scream that makes your stomach churn at the thought of what could be happening right outside their house. They both got up quickly and went outside with a flashlight to see what it was. They both shrieked at what they saw. There, right in front of them, was Mike lying face down in a pool of blood with no arms. Instead of where his arms were, was blood gushing out, covering the helpless child. He screamed again in a pain as he tried to drag his body toward the house, only to cause more blood loss. His parents quickly called the police and ambulance, and tried to help their now armless boy. Luckily, the boy lived. He lived all right. Lived a horrible life. Thanks to his parents, he was pronounced mentally unstable. He was kept in a dark cell and under surveillance all the time. His parents would rarely visit him. Mike was told his parents had a new baby girl named Julie. Mike said nothing about his family. His family eventually forgot all about him. His parents told everyone he died. That was a lie. 10 years had passed since Mike was put in his prison cell, said Jake as he grabbed a soda and sat down. He was waiting for this day. Mike was released and pronounced to have a mental disorder, so he took medication. He was given a home, money, and prosthetic functional arms. He could now pick up things and move on with his life. Look forward to the bright future. However, it was anything but. He went to high school now and was beat up and made fun of on a daily basis. He felt his sanity slipping away every day. He tried to look forward to the good things in life, but could not see them. He hated it. He hated his life. He hated his school. He hated his parents most of all. One night, Julie woke up from screaming from her parents' room. She got up and raced to their door. She began to cry when she saw her parents' mutilated bodies soaked in blood. Julie then heard what sounded like a chainsaw. She turned around and met face to face with a tall, bloody man holding a chainsaw. He was shirtless and had duct tape over his mouth. He also had what looked like sewed-on arms. Her parents' arms. Her heart raced and she couldn't move. Fear had gotten a hold of her. The man leaned forward to the girl, looked her right in the eyes. He took off his duct tape and whispered softly, "It was needed." The end. "So, what do you think?" said Jake while he cautiously drank his soda. "I loved it," I exclaimed, grabbing a soda as well. It was one of the best stories I had heard in a while. To be honest, I almost thought it was real. I said while smiling. "Ha, yeah," said Jake with a smile. I now remembered scaredy cat Alex, and began to wonder what was taking him so long. He should have been done going pee a long time ago. Jake must have been thinking the same thing, because he got up and said he would go find Alex. I offered to come, but he told me to stay where I was and he could handle it. I went inside my tent and decided to get some rest. It was probably 1 a.m. already, and I was tired. As I fell asleep, I remembered that bag I saw with Murderous Mike on it. Was it the story he told me? He wanted to do a prank with a story like that. I couldn't really think about what kind of prank it would be in this deserted spot of the forest. Well, he will probably tell us tomorrow, I thought, as I drifted into a deep slumber. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, sweating like crazy. I was literally in a puddle of sweat. It must be really hot in these woods, I thought as I got up to use the restroom. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way out toward the trees, where Alex and Jake had gone. They were probably fast asleep in their tents. As I was walking down the path, I felt like I was being watched. Like something was following me. I would constantly turn around when I swore I hear something, to only find nothing there. I told myself that you are stupid for getting scared so easily. Just go to the bathroom, and go back to sleep. I came to a pathway now that splits into 2 routes. I decided to just go right, and take a pee at a tree with a bunch of bushes. As I made my way right, I began to smell something awful. Something that made me queasy. I covered my nose, in order to try and stop the stench, but it only got worse as I continued walking. Eventually, I stopped because it was so strong. I fell to my knees and felt like puking. I then realized that the odor was coming from above me. I moved the flashlight up to see. I dropped it and began puking. Hanging above me were dead hands, and cut off limbs tied to the tree branches by rope. I then screamed, because there were rotten human body parts dangling right above me the whole time. I got up as quick as I could with the flashlight, and sprinted back to the tents. I couldn't believe what I had seen and was desperate to get out of this god-forsaken hellhole. As I was running back, I stopped when I saw a man appeared in the light. He wore a black jacket with white sleeves and jeans with his back facing towards me. However, he turned around and looked at me, probably noticing the light. I screamed and cried at what I saw. He was holding Alex's head in his hands, with a hook in his right eye that was connected to a rope. Not Alex. No. This must be some sort of dream. I need to wake up now. I then looked at the man's face, and a chill coursed its way through my entire body. He had black duct tape over his mouth. Murderous Mike. No. This is a dream. Wake up, Kyle, wake up. I kept telling myself as I began sprinting the other direction. I didn't know where the hell I was going. All I knew, that I had to get as far from him as possible. I wasn't much of a runner, so when I got to the 2 pathways, and took a left, I was dying for a breath. I stopped and turned around. No one. Good, he didn't follow me. I turned back around somewhat relieved only to stop breathing again. Right in front of me was Mike. He ran at me, and before I could do anything, I was on the ground. He took his chainsaw, and put it in front of my face. I tried to move, but it was no use. I was stuck under his weight. He then lowered the chainsaw even closer, the blade spinning rapidly. He used his free hand to remove the duct tape from his mouth, and I began to laugh and cry. It was Jake. You got me, good Jake. You win. I stuttered to him. Now I knew it was all a prank. Jake would let me go, and we would laugh at how scared I was. Just like old times. However, he inched it even closer, and said with a smile, I told you, Kyle. It was needed. I believe I should have typed this up here at the very beginning before even posting this, but this is my first creepypasta and actually my first public post as well. It has several wrongs which I do not intend to fix. This is how I thought of it in my head, and I will keep it this way. Go ahead, you can fix it yourself. I have much more elements in my life than just this wiki which I only stumbled upon yesterday. I will admit this creepypasta was work of an amateur. I only did this for fun, and its main purpose was to prove how important Splash Mountain was. Work of an amateur. Good day all. This was just a very heartbreaking experience for me. I tried to type down every detail, so investigators could possibly connect or at least do something about it, unlike Disney. One day my niece and I were at Disney World for her birthday. She loved the ride Splash Mountain, and wanted to ride it on her birthday before it would be rethemed to The Princess and the Frog. I loved her, so much so her mom and I promised her birthday wish would happen. So just her and I went. She flew in from Michigan with her mom, or my best friend, but my niece calls me her aunt, so that caught on, and I already lived in Florida. My niece and I left without her mom, and were at Frontierland, when a guy in the Burr Rabbit, he's the main character on Splash Mountain, mascot costume came and said he was gifting random kids free Splash Mountain merchandise as a little farewell to Splash Mountain since it would be closing soon. He said he would take around 2 or 3 kids at a time into the room, which he never mentioned a name, or where it was, with him, and the kid got to pick out a toy. So I let my niece go, because I knew she would just love it. I remember the Burr Rabbit mascot costume being very friendly with my niece. He held her hand, and they walked a few ways. So I figured I would just follow them. They met 2 other small families. When I mean small, I mean just 1 kid and their parent or guardian, and the kids left with the Burr Rabbit costume and my niece, while the other parents followed along just like what I did. They reached the room, which was right on the side of Splash Mountain, where no one could see it. The Burr Rabbit mascot costume opened the door, and noticed I was there watching, so he waved right before going inside with my niece. So I couldn't help but wave back, because I too love Disney. Me and the other parents waiting just gave some small talk, and it was pretty awkward, so we just waited. After 5 or 10 minutes later, I realized something was wrong. So I went up to the door and tried opening it, but it was locked, which I hadn't figured because the Burr Rabbit guy and the kids were already in there. My stomach gave that light feeling, and I, plus the other parents, went to a cast member. We told them what happened calmly. One half of me believed that the guy accidentally locked the door, which I swore to myself was the reason why it was locked. But the cast member didn't know what we were talking about, and asked us to show him what door we were talking about. But we couldn't find where the door was because it was out of view from everything else. And I panicked really badly. We never found the door. The bodies of all 3 children, including my niece, were found with wounds sitting against the wall behind the fake briar patch near the one part of the ride where the animatronic Burr Rabbit and Mr. Bluebird are singing, and Burr Fox and Burr Bear are watching from afar, planning their attack on Burr Rabbit. Ever since I have had an awful feeling of guilt for my niece's death. Like it was my fault. Of course it is my fault. It always has. It is all my fault for the unfortunate death of my niece. Disney has kept this murder a secret, of course. They don't want to close their parks to investigate because all they want is the cash. Like always. Of course, it was never like this, back at old Disney. I wish Walt was still alive and running this place like a true boss. After her murder, her mom decided to look through the notes that were written by my niece to see if there was anything worthwhile about her life that she kept secret that could also bring back memories of her. One note was labeled "Murder at the Mountain," which somewhat shocked her mom. I'll type exactly what the note said. On my birthday, I'm planning on riding Splash Mountain. What a special day it'll be. I'll ride in the log, then get off around the area where Burr Rabbit and Mr. Bluebird are singing the song "How Do You Do." Maybe I'll get off the log secretly, or maybe I shall do it in front of everyone. But no matter what, I will. I will reveal a knife from the pocket of my pants. I will stab myself right next to Burr Rabbit. And it will all be just for him. So will 2 others. But this time, one will kill themselves near the spot where I will kill myself, right next to Burr Bear, who will be watching from afar. And one will kill themselves next to Burr Fox, who will be in the next room past the room where Burr Rabbit and Mr. Bluebird are singing "How Do You Do." I will prove to everyone that Burr Rabbit matters. That Song of the South matters. And that Splash Mountain matters. Hopefully my movement will prevail and prove the valuable Splash Mountain is worthy of being kept. Hopefully everyone will know of my death and realize someone killed themselves for the worthiness of Splash Mountain. I know I've been watching too much Five Nights at Freddy's, but the things they say in that game are true. A soul can live on in almost anything, if they have unfinished business to attend, or if they died a grueling gory death. I will have unfinished business to attend, alright. There was a reason why I would kill myself next to Brer Rabbit, and why the others would kill themselves next to the other two Brers, and that, my friend, I will tell you about. We will live on in the suits. We will prove and teach all about Splash Mountain, and its worthiness to live. Once everyone has it printed in their mind, that Splash Mountain matters more than that stupid The Princess and the Frog movie, me and my new dead friends will finally be freed. We will prove those idiots. When I first read this, I was shocked. No matter what, she was planning on dying right on Splash Mountain, right where the 3 dead bodies were found, including her. But I know I could have prevented this. I would have stopped her from getting off. But this man, he went straight ahead, and killed my beloved niece, and the 2 others himself. I feel that I could have prevented this too. If I could have just been a greater aunt, then I knew I could have not left her alone with some stranger. I wish I was never involved with this in the first place. It was all my fault. The most beloved angel in the world has died, and it's all because of me. Me. I don't deserve anything. I don't deserve my home, nor my husband. I don't deserve my life. Hello, this is not the woman you think it is. I rather not share her name, as she never shared hers throughout the grieving story. This is her husband. My wife, she killed herself. Reading the last paragraph she wrote, I figure she did this because, well, she thought she didn't deserve her life. She thought she failed. She thought she didn't deserve her body after what she did. She thought as her punishment, she would remove her soul from it. If you can see this, dear, it is never your fault for something someone else did. I hope when you're reading this, you know that I still love you with all my heart, no matter what you do. Maybe you can come back. Please come back. I love you. You didn't deserve this. You only deserve the best. You tried, yet you failed. But everyone makes mistakes. And they say mistakes are how you learn. You made another mistake, and it was worse than a punishment. You gave up your life. And my dear niece, if you're reading this, we love you too. Although there may never have been anything I could do for you, your aunt still tried. She wanted to make your birthday wish come true. And I hope she did. The following pages are from a notebook that was discovered lying at the foot of an oak tree beside the Lincoln Highway, between Bowman and Auburn. They would have been dismissed immediately as the work of a disordered mind, if it had not been for the unaccountable disappearance, 8 days before, of James Buckingham and Edgar Halpin. Experts testified that the handwriting was undoubtedly that of Buckingham. A silver dollar, find a handkerchief marked with Buckingham's initials, were also found not far from the notebook. Not everyone, perhaps, will believe that my 10 years' hatred for Edgar Halpin was the impelling force that drove me to the perfecting of a most unique invention. Only those who have detested and loathed another man with the black fervor of the feeling I had conceived will understand the patience with which I sought to devise a revenge that should be safe and adequate at the same time. The wrong he had done me was one that must be expiated sooner or later, and nothing short of his death would be sufficient. However, I did not care to hang, not even for a crime that I could regard as nothing more than the mere execution of justice, and, as a lawyer, I knew how difficult, how practically impossible, was the commission of a murder that would leave no betraying evidence. Therefore, I puzzled long and fruitlessly as to the manner in which Halpin should die, before my inspiration came to me. I had reason enough to hate Edgar Halpin. We had been bosom friends all through our school days and through the first years of our professional life as law partners. But when Halpin married the one woman I had ever loved with complete devotion, all friendship ceased on my side, and was replaced by an ice-like barrier of inexorable enmity. Even the death of Alice, 5 years after the marriage, made no difference, for I could not forgive the happiness of which I had been deprived, the happiness they had shared during those years, like the thieves they were. I felt that she would have cared for me if it had not been for help, and indeed, she and I had been almost engaged before the beginning of his rivalry. It must not be supposed, however, that I was indiscreet and to betray my feelings at any time. Halpin was my daily associate in the Auburn law firm to which we belonged, and I continued to be a most welcome and frequent guest at his home. I doubt if he ever knew that I had cared greatly for Alice. I am secretive and undemonstrative by temperament, and also, I am proud. No one, except Alice herself, ever surmised my suffering, and even she knew nothing of my resentment. Halpin himself trusted me, and nurturing as I did the idea of retaliation at some future time, I took care that he should continue to trust me. I made myself necessary to him in all ways. I helped him when my heart was a cauldron of seething poisons. I spoke words of brotherly affection, and clapped him on the back when I would rather have driven a dagger through him. I knew all the tortures and all the nausea of a hypocrite. And day after day, year after year, I made my varying plans for an ultimate revenge. Apart from my legal studies and duties, during those 10 years, I apprised myself of everything available that dealt with the methods of murder. Crimes of passion allured me with a fateful interest, and I read untiringly the records of particular cases. I made a study of weapons and poisons, and as I studied them, I pictured to myself the death of Halpin in every conceivable way. I imagined the deed as being done at all hours of the day and night, in a multitude of places. The only flaw in these dreams was my inability to think of any spot that would assure perfect safety from subsequent detection. It was my bent towards scientific speculation and excrement that finally gave me the clue I sought. I had long been familiar with the theory that other worlds or dimensions may coexist in the same space with ours by reason of a different molecular structure and vibrational rate, rendering them intangible for us. One day, when I was indulging in a murderous fantasy, in which for the 1000th time I imagined myself throttling Halpin with my bare hands, it occurred to me that some unseen dimension, if one could only penetrate it, would be the ideal place for the commission of a homicide. All circumstantial evidence, as well as the corpse itself, would be lacking. In other words, one would have a perfect absence of what is known as the corpus delicti. The problem of how to obtain entrance to this dimension was of course an unsolved one, but I did not feel that it would necessarily prove insoluble. I set myself immediately to a consideration of the difficulties to be overcome, and the possible ways and means. There are reasons why I do not care to set forth in this narrative the details of the various experiments to which I was drawn during the next 3 years. The theory that underlay my tests and researches was a very simple one, but the processes involved were highly intricate. In brief, the premise from which I worked was that the vibratory rate of objects in the fourth dimension could be artificially established by means of some mechanism, and that things or persons exposed to the influence of the vibration could be transported thereby to this alien realm. For a long time, all my experiments were condemned to failure, because I was groping among mysterious powers and recondite laws whose motive principle I had not wholly grasped. I will not even hint at the basic nature of the device which brought about my ultimate success, for I do not want others to follow where I have gone and find themselves in the same dismal predicament. I will say, however, that the desired vibration was attained by condensing ultraviolet rays in a refractive apparatus made of certain very sensitive materials which I will not name. The resultant power was stored in a kind of battery, and could be emitted from a vibratory disc suspended above an ordinary office chair, exposing everything beneath the disc to the influence of the new vibration. The range of the influence could be closely regulated by means of an insulating attachment. By the use of the apparatus, I finally succeeded in precipitating various articles into the fourth dimension: a dinner plate, a bust of Dante, a Bible, a French novel and a house cat. All disappeared from sight and touch in a few instants, when the ultraviolet power was turned upon them. I knew that henceforth they were functioning as atomic entities in a world where all things had the same vibratory rate that had been artificially induced by means of my mechanism. Before venturing into the invisible domain myself, it was of course necessary to have some way of returning. I invented a second battery and a second vibratory disc, through which, by the use of certain infrared rays, the vibrations of our own world could be established. By turning the force from the disc on the very same spot where the dinner plate and the other articles had disappeared, I succeeded in recovering all of them. All were absolutely unchanged, and though several months had gone by, the cat had not suffered in any way from its fourth-dimensional incarceration. The infrared device was portable, and I meant to take it with me on my visit to the new realm in company with Edgar Halpin. I but not Halpin would return anon to resume the threads of mundane existence. My experiments had all been carried on with utter secrecy. To mask their real nature, as well as to provide myself with the needful privacy, I had built a small laboratory in the woods of an uncultivated ranch that I owned, lying midway between Auburn and Bowman. Here I retired at varying intervals, when I had the requisite leisure, ostensibly to conduct some chemical experiments of an educative but far from unusual type. I never admitted anyone to the laboratory, and no great amount of curiosity was evinced by friends and acquaintances regarding its contents or the tests I was carrying on. Never did I breathe a syllable to anyone that could indicate the true goal of my researches. I shall never forget the jubilation I felt when the infrared device had proven its practicality by retrieving the plate, the bust, the 2 volumes and the cat. I was so eager for the consummation of my long-delayed revenge that I did not even consider a preliminary personal trip into the 4th dimension. I had determined that Edgar Halpin must precede me when I went. I did not feel, however, that it would be wise to tell him anything concerning the real nature of my device or the proposed excursion. Halpin, at this time, was suffering from recurrent attacks of terrific neuralgia. One day, when he had complained more than usual, I told him under the seal of confidence that I had been working on a vibratory invention for the relief of such maladies, and had finally perfected it. "I'll take you out to the laboratory tonight, and you can try it," I said. "It will fix you up in a jiffy. All you'll have to do will be to sit in a chair and let me turn on the current. But don't say anything to anybody." "Thanks, old man," he rejoined. "I'll certainly be grateful if you can do anything to stop this damnable pain. It feels like electric drills boring through my head all the time." I had chosen my time well, for all things were favorable to the maintenance of the secrecy I desired. Halpin lived on the outskirts of the town, and he was alone for the nonce, his housekeeper having gone away on a brief visit to some sick relative. The night was murky and foggy, and I drove to Halpin's house and stopped for him shortly after the dinner hour, when few people were abroad. I do not think anyone saw us when we left the town. I followed a rough and little used by road for most of the way to my laboratory, saying that I did not care to meet other cars in the thick fog, if I could avoid it. We passed no one, and I felt that this was a good omen, and that everything had combined to further my plan. Halpin uttered an exclamation of surprise when I turned on the lights in my laboratory. "I didn't dream you had so much stuff here," he remarked, peering about with respectful curiosity at the long array of unsuccessful appliances which I had thrown aside in the course of my labors. I pointed to the chair above which the ultraviolet vibrator was suspended. "Take a seat, Ed," I enjoined him. "We'll soon cure everything that ails you. Sure you aren't going to electrocute me?" he joked as he obeyed my direction. Halpin uttered an exclamation of surprise when I turned on the lights in my laboratory. A thrill of fierce triumph ran through me like the stimulation of some rare elixir when he had seated himself. Everything was in my power now, and the moment of recompense for my 10 years' humiliation and suffering was at hand. Halpin was so unsuspecting. The thought of any danger to himself, of any treachery on my part, would have been fantastically incredible to him. Putting my hand beneath my coat, I caressed the hilt of the hunting knife that I carried. "All set?" I asked him. "Sure, Mike. Go ahead and shoot." I had found the exact range that would involve all of Halpin's body without affecting the chair itself. Fixing my gaze upon him, I pressed the little knob that turned on the current of vibratory rays. The result was practically instantaneous, for he seemed to melt like a puff of thinning smoke. I could still see his outlines for a moment, and the look of a phantasmal astonishment on his face. And then he was gone, utterly gone. Perhaps it will be a source of wonderment that, having annihilated Halpin as far as all earthly existence was concerned, I was not content merely to leave him in the unseen, intangible plane to which he had been transposed. Would that I had been content to do so. But the wrong I had suffered was hot and cankerous within me, and I could not bear to think that he still lived, in any form or upon any plane. Nothing but absolute death would suffice to assuage my resentment, and the death must be inflicted by my own hand. It now remained to follow Halpin into that realm which no man had ever visited before, and of whose geographical conditions and characteristics I had formed no idea whatever. I felt sure, however, that I could enter it and return safely, after disposing of my victim. The return of the cat left no apparent room for doubt on that score. I turned out the lights, and seating myself in the chair with the portable infrared vibrator in my arms, I switched on the ultraviolet power. The sensation I felt was that of one who falls with nightmare velocity into a great gulf. My ears were deaf with the intolerable thunder of my descent, a frightful sickness overcame me, and I was near to losing all consciousness for a moment, in the black vortex of roaring space and force, that seemed to draw me naderward through the ultimate pits. Then the speed of my fall was gradually retarded, and I came gently down to something that was solid beneath my feet. There was a dim glimmering of light that grew stronger as my eyes accustomed themselves to it, and by this slide I saw Halpin standing a few feet away. Behind him were dark, amorphous rocks, and the vague outlines of a desolate landscape of low mounds and primordial treeless flats. Even though I had hardly known what to expect, I was somewhat surprised by the character of the environment in which I found myself. At a guess, I would have said that the fourth dimension would be something more colorous and complex and varied, a land of multifold hues and many-angled forms. However, in its drear and primitive desolation, the place was truly ideal for the commission of the act one had intended. Halpin came toward me in the doubtful light. There was a dazed and almost idiotic look on his face, and he stuttered a little as he tried to speak. "What happened?" he articulated at last. "Never mind what happened. It isn't a circumstance to what's going to happen now." I laid the portable vibrator aside on the ground as I spoke. The dazed look was still on Halpin's face when I drew the hunting knife and stabbed him through the body with one clean thrust. In that thrust, all the stifled hatred, all the cankering resentment of 10 insufferable years was finally vindicated. He fell in a twisted heap, twitched a little, and lay still. The blood oozed very slowly from his side and formed a puddle. I remember wondering at its slowness, even then, for the oozing seemed to go on through hours and days. Somehow, as I stood there, I was obsessed by a feeling of utter unreality. No doubt the long strain I had been under, the daily stress of indurate emotions and decade-deferred hopes, had left me unable to realize the final consummation of my desire when it came. The whole thing seemed no more than one of the homicidal daydreams in which I had imagined myself stabbing Halpin to the heart and seeing his hateful body lie before me. At length, I decided that it was time to effect my return, for surely nothing could be gained by lingering any longer beside Halpin's corpse, amid the unutterable dreariness of the fourth-dimensional landscape. I erected the vibrator in a position where its rays could be turned upon myself, and pressed the switch. I was aware of a sudden vertigo, and felt that I was about to begin another descent into fathomless vortical gulfs. But, though the vertigo persisted, nothing happened, and I found that I was still standing beside the corpse, in the same dismal milieu. Dumbfoundment and growing consternation crept over me. Apparently, for some unknown reason, the vibrator would not work in the way I had so confidently expected. Perhaps, in these new surroundings, there was some barrier to the full development of the infrared power. I do not know, but at any rate, there I was, in a truly singular and far from agreeable predicament. I do not know how long I fooled in a mounting frenzy with the mechanism of the vibrator, in the hope that something had temporarily gone wrong and could be remedied, if the difficulty were only found. However, all my tinkerings were of no avail. The machine was in perfect working order, but the required force was wanting. I tried the experiment of exposing small articles to the influence of the rays. A silver coin and a handkerchief dissolved and disappeared very slowly, and I felt that they must have regained the levels of mundane existence. But evidently the vibrational force was not strong enough to transport a human being. Finally I gave it up and threw the vibrator to the ground. In the surge of a violent despair that came upon me, I felt the need of muscular action, of prolonged movement, and I started off at once to explore the weird realm in which I had involuntarily imprisoned myself. It was an unearthly land, a land such as might have existed before the creation of life. There were undulating blanks of desolation beneath the uniform gray of a heaven without moon or sun or stars or clouds, from which an uncertain and diffuse glimmering was cast upon the world beneath. There were no shadows, for the light seemed to emanate from all directions. The soil was a gray dust in places and a gray viscidity of slime in others, and the mounds I have already mentioned were like the backs of prehistoric monsters heaving from the primal ooze. There were no signs of insect or animal life, there were no trees, no herbs, and not even a blade of grass, a patch of moss or lichen, or a trace of algae. Many rocks were strewn chaotically through the desolation, and their forms were such as an idiotic demon might have devised in aping the handiwork of God. The light was so dim that all things were lost at a little distance, and I could not tell whether the horizon was near or far. It seems to me that I must have wandered on for several hours, maintaining as direct a course of progression as I could. I had a compass, a thing that I always carry with me, but it refused to function, and I was driven to conclude that there were no magnetic poles in this new world. Suddenly, as I rounded a pile of the vast amorphous boulders, I came to a human body that lay huddled on the ground, and saying incredulously that it was Halpin. The blood still oozed from the fabric of his coat, and the pool it had formed was no larger than when I had begun my journey. I felt sure that I had not wandered in a circle, as people are said to do amid unfamiliar surroundings. How, then, could I have returned to the scene of my crime? The problem nearly drove me mad as I pondered it, and I set off with frantic vigor in an opposite direction from the one I had first taken. For all intents and purposes, the scene through which I now passed was identical with the one that lay on the other side of Halpin's corpse. It was hard to believe that the low mounds, the drear levels of dust and ooze and the monstrous boulders were not the same as those among which I had made my former way. As I went, I took out my watch with the idea of timing my progress, but the hands had stopped at the very moment when I had taken my plunge into unknown space from the laboratory, and though I wound it carefully, it refused to run. After walking an enormous distance, during which, to my surprise, I felt no fatigue whatever, I came once more to the body I had sought to leave. I think that I went really mad then, for a little while. Now, after a duration of time or eternity which I have no means of computing, I am writing this penciled account on the leaves of my notebook. I am writing it beside the corpse of Edgar Halpin, from which I have been unable to flee. For a score of excursions into the dim realms on all sides have ended by bringing me back to it after a certain interval. The corpse is still fresh, and the blood is not dried. Apparently, the thing we know as time is well-nigh non-existent in this world, or at any rate, is seriously disordered in its action, and most of the normal concomitants of time are likewise absent, and space itself has the property of returning always to the same point. The voluntary movements I have performed might be considered as a sort of time sequence, but in regard to involuntary things there is little or no time movement. I experience neither physical weariness or hunger, but the horror of my situation is not to be conveyed in human language, and hell itself can hardly have devised a name for it. When I have finished writing this narration, I shall precipitate the notebook into the levels of mundane life by means of the infrared vibrator. Some obscure need of confessing my crime, and telling my predicament to others, has led me to an act, of which I should never have believed myself capable, for I am the most uncommunicative of men by nature. Apart from the satisfying of this need, the composition of my narrative is something to do. It is a temporary reprieve from the desperate madness that will surge upon me soon, and the grey eternal horror of the limbo to which I have doomed myself beside the undecaying body of my victim.